As I said at the very beginning, Bishop Lucia was supposed to be standing here this evening. And as I try never to stand here without being very prepared, what I will try to do this evening is just present a brief meditation to reflect upon that extremely difficult gospel. And the whole of it was not even in your trifold, only the short version. But it is a difficult gospel to understand. So Pope Francis recently addressed some of his American critics who say that he has compromised church teaching on marriage and divorce and on who can receive communion. These critics say that his pastoral approach is way too lenient and that he has confused all of us. The critics also say that he upsets the wealthy with his critique of global capitalism, income inequality, and the exploitation of workers. But isn't it interesting that Pope Francis is being critiqued and faulted basically for promoting gospel values of justice and mercy? But we see in today's reading the gospel that Jesus was also criticized for being way too lenient with sinners and for reaching out to the poor and especially reaching out to those who were outcasts and those who really didn't even observe the law. Now in that gospel, Luke presents us with a parable that seems to address such criticisms about a steward accused of the same negligence that Jesus was being criticized for. The brilliant twist in this parable is that the extravagant and crafty steward, Scripture scholars tell us, may be Jesus himself. Faced with the expulsion by his rich boss for giving away the store, the steward cuts deals with each of the master's debtors. Surprisingly, the rich man commends the steward for showing worldly prudence, which is often lacking in spiritual people. It is a shocking conclusion to a story that has been misinterpreted as blessing honest business practices. But the point of the gospel is that Jesus was in fact representing God by being merciful with sinners, God's debtors. And this is the same message we see throughout the Scriptures, Jesus' very radical approach that he took towards sinners, searching for the lost sheep, refusing to judge, seemingly letting everyone off the hook. You see, throughout the Scriptures, Jesus tells us that he did not come to condemn the world, but he came to lavish God's unconditional love on everyone, especially the sinners and the outcasts. And this really does not make a lot of sense to those people who see that the purpose of institutional religion is simply keeping order and punishing those who obey the rules. That's not what Jesus was about. But this does not mean that sin has no consequences or that God does not care about human evil. Sin and evil lead to death, and the malefactors create chaos and suffering in their own lives. But Jesus in the gospel is letting us know that God does not need to add punishment to the alienation and the misery that people bring on themselves by being dishonest and selfish. So what Jesus and Pope Francis represent is the merciful face of a loving God seeking to bring people in from the cold back to the dignity and the innocence that they still possess as children created in God's image. So really the basic point of that gospel, we are all created in God's image. We can all be forgiven. We are all connected to one another. And God's unconditional love is lavished on all people, no matter who we are, where we are, what color we might be, what gender we might be. God's unconditional love is for all of us.